Iowa, and I want to take you to Culturegrams. Let's go to our Iowa Online website, and we will go down to the Culturegrams link. We'll go ahead and type in our subscribe 31 Fort Madison, Iowa, and of course our password. Now I would like for you to go to the States Edition. Just go down here at the bottom to Explore. And you're going to find the United States. And since we're studying about Iowa, I would like for you to click on Iowa. And let's start with this page. A couple of questions that I would like for you to look at is on Did You Know? Did you know that the Iowa is named for the Iowa Native American tribe? Did you know that in Iowa there are 5 times more hogs than people? Did you know we're called the Hawkeye State? And did you know that our state was established in 1846 and it is the 29th state that was added to the Union? A couple of other things that I would like to include on our lesson on Culturegrams for Iowa. I would like to take you up to our very first link on the sidebar to climate. Looking at the climate in Iowa, it gives you your average seasonal high and low temperatures. It also talks about some very powerful and dangerous weather that is pretty prominent in Iowa. As you know, we are susceptible to storms at any time, but our most likely dangerous thunderstorms that strike are in June. We're also, as you can see, susceptible to tornadoes. Let's go on over to geography, because that's one of the more important things that I want you to get acquainted with. Clicking on that, let's go to geography and take a look at what they had to say. It says, Iowa is famous for its rolling hills and some of the richest and deepest topsoil in the United States. Iowa contains 1/4 of the world's top farmland. Millions of years ago, did you know that this region was covered by warm seas? During the Ice Age, glaciers pushed down from the north, flattening the landscape and grinding up rock and gravel. As the climate warmed, lakes formed from the melted ice. These lakes later drained away, and the empty lake beds are now the gentle hills that cover almost all of Iowa. If you traveled north, and I'm not reading from this text at this time, you will notice how rolling the hills get in the upper part of northern Iowa. Let's go on down and take a little bit of a look at resources in Iowa. We find that in Iowa, Iowa's soil makes it a perfect place for agriculture. And Iowa also has about 90,000 farms. Except for California, no state exports, or those that sell to other countries, more agricultural products than Iowa. Iowa raises about 1/5 of the nation's corn, and it produces about 1/4 of its pork. Iowa also raises oats, hay, soybean, cattle, and other dairy products that are important to Iowa's agriculture. One of the interesting things I noticed on this sidebar is a timeline, and I want you, as you're looking at the timeline, to notice all the different entries that are recorded in chronological order. If you look right here, you'll notice that corn first makes its appearance by the Native Americans in AD 1000. All right, we also notice that in 1673, Marquette and Joliet also meet Iowa natives along the Mississippi River. By the way, the pronunciation of Joliet is also Joliet. Thought I would throw that in for you. In the 1800s, we find that Napoleon sells the Louisiana Territory to the United States. If you remember, we talked just briefly about this as Thomas Jefferson struggled with the decision whether to make this purchase or not. Moving on down with our scrolling, we find that in 1804 to 1815, the United States signs its first land treaties with the Fox tribes. One other thing that I wanted to note, we find in 1838, Iowa Territory is established. And if you remember, we talked briefly last week about the Northwest Territory. Some of those states would have been Wisconsin and also part of eastern Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana. Now we find Iowa is being established as a territory. And scrolling on down, we also see that the United States signs the final treaty for the Native American land in Iowa. Let's take a look at some of our other features on culturegrams. In Iowa, we find that from many nations, as the Native Americans left, white settlers rushed in. And during the first half of the 19th century, more settlers came from the eastern states like Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and New England states. So in the second half of the century, immigrants from Europe began to arrive, and most were German. Many also came from Britain and Ireland. Scandinavians and the Croatians and Italians even came later. But by 1900, most of the available land had been taken. Moving on along, I also wanted to note in our introduction to culturegrams, the American Gothic. We find that Grant Wood, a painter that worked at the University of Iowa, had a famous painting that you might be very familiar with. It is called the American Gothic. And, you know, close to our heart is Iowa, but close to you is actually the American Gothic House, located over by Eldon. If you go over to Van Buren, it's a straight shot across. I was able to visit there just a couple of years ago. I think it's a little bit more available as far as being open in the summer. Folks, that kind of concludes a little bit of an introduction to our culturegrams, and I hope that this has been not only informative, but you'll also be able to easily access culturegrams for many of our other states.